Welcome to the Good Fight podcast. My name is Kim Bigler. We started this podcast for anybody that's just jumping on and we're new to, is we started this podcast when my son Phoenix had a cardiac arrest in 2023, and which led to a global anoxic brain injury, and he miraculously survived. And we kind of came in to tell everybody that testimony, because so many miracles happening, but also so much suffering that happened at the same time. And it was kind of like we were as we recorded the Good Fight podcast in the beginning, it was kind of like we were walking through a valley that the only thing we knew to do was to share it. And because we wanted, almost, I hate to say it, we just wanted to be rebellious against what just happened to our son. And we're like, if we're going to walk through this valley, we are gonna bring people with us to experience hope in the valley. We are going to talk about it in a way that is overcoming, because we were walking with the Lord and we were seeing him do amazing things. But what I needed to hear at the time was testimonies that I heard amazing things so that I could have hope for more, my faith would be filled every day like a jar because of what we were going through. But I also wanted to hear the suffering part. I felt alone. I was like, yeah, they had it bad, but maybe not as bad as what I'm going through, because that's what Satan does to you. Makes you think you're the only person going through something and no one has experienced the depth of it. And so I needed to hear some really raw testimonies that helped me in that walk. And so we got brought into the studio, my husband and I. If you have not heard those episodes, please go to the very beginning and listen to those. Those are amazing. I still listen to them today. That helps me process not only what happened, but helps me to have faith of more overcoming for my own son. But I bring on guests now that are willing to go that raw, real, but also share the redemptive and what they have been through to help others. And I have a guest, Chelsey. And how do you say your last name?
Passon.
Okay, because I was like, I was trying to make it to like Passon, Passin, And so she just says it's Passon. So it's like,
it's not as like,
it's not as like, heavy hitting as how I had it in my head.
Right.
And I'm out Chelsey because Gerardo, her husband, is actually the producer and director of and all things tech of the Good Fight podcast. And as I got to know him, I got to know her and realize we share a trauma event of being in the hospital with our child. And a lot of parents I know have been in hospitals with their children. And I don't think anybody understands that fight, that wrestle with faith, while their child is in the hospital like that, fighting for their lives, or when their lives hang in the balance. And so Chelsey has that testimony that she's willing to share. But before we go there, before you tell us how God helped you overcome when all hell broke loose and all seemed lost, since that's why we're here, I do want to always am interested to know how your faith was before the event. Was that the thing that you drilled down into when it happened? Was that something that came in the midst of all hell breaking loose, or something that's kind of developed after? So let me know how you grew up and your faith journey before that.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a Christian household. So my family were very faith-based, and we would go to church all the time. Like Sundays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, whatever events they had, my parents made sure like my siblings and I were there. So faith has been something instilled in me at such a young age. But I kind of grew up not really understanding what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. It was more of like fear-based of like, oh, I'm doing all these things. I don't want to go to hell.
Totally.
Like I'm doing all these things because I want to avoid the fiery pit or whatever. But I never really understood what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. Like that I think it was talked about, but wasn't really like the forefront of like what our church was at the time, really pushing for.
Do you think, and I keep hearing that in these chairs, do you think,
Yeah.
and I have to stop right there because I feel like it's an important point to like point out, is that do you think you're never taught a relationship with Jesus because those leaders that are teaching don't have one? Or is it because they don't understand truly the core of Christianity? They teach it, they preach it, you can go into the Word of God.
Right.
But when that relationship is lost, what do you think that's from? Not understanding it? A completely different religion as it is. It's just religion, not relationship. Like, why do you think that? I hear that so often. I was taught the do's and don'ts, but
Right.
I was not taught that he's my best friend.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with what church you're going to based off like the pastor. Because you can go to a church and feel like you're doing everything as a Christian as a checkbox.
Which is
But,
earning
like,
salvation.
exactly.
Which is moralism. That's really not Christianity. It's more like moralism.
It's and that's when there's a difference between like a relationship with the Lord and then religion. Like
Totally.
I don't want the religious things. I can know all these amazingly like theological things, but if I don't have a
Yes.
relationship with Jesus,
Yes.
that doesn't matter.
So that I asked that, and I'm honing in on that because growing up, that's what I felt like I had. I knew what they wanted me to do. I knew
Right.
how I should act.
Right.
But I think I was rebelling, and I rebelled. Okay, let's just say pre-Jesus people, which was like when I finally understood who he was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
Before that, I was rebelling against it because deep down inside, I'm about truth. I've
Yeah.
always been about truth. Give me the deep, give me the depth, give me
Right.
the root of something. I hate the shallow, and I know when someone's kind of BSing. So
Right.
I was like, I hear all this do's and don'ts, but if Jesus has died on the cross for me, don't you think that I would be able to get more out of that somehow?
Right, right.
And so I was rebelling against that. So it's interesting that that's how you grew up.
Yeah, and it had such a strong hold over my life when I was a child. I remember being
Were you afraid
terrified.
of everything?
I remember being terrified going to sleep. I had terrible separation anxiety from my parents. So like whenever I went to school, if my mom wasn't there in the car line at the right time every single day, like it was like so gripped
That's
over
cool.
me. It
That's
was terrible.
bondage. Yeah.
It was terrible.
That's bondage.
And it sucks because it's like imagine if I was taught what it really meant to have a relationship with Jesus at that age. Like of all the amazing things that could have happened and the transformation I could have had then besides, oh, I got to do all these things or I'm going to go to hell, which ended up me spiraling into the issues that I've had in high school of living for Chelsey, not really understanding like what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus because I was just like, oh, I'm okay. I'm a good person. I'll do this. But in reality, it's not about being a good person. It's about, do you know Jesus or not? Are you talking to him? Are you praying? Are you getting into your quiet time with the Lord? Because you can, like I said already, you can know all these amazing things about the Bible, but if you're not living it out, if you're not talking to God, if you're not
drawing close to the one.
Exactly. If you're not wanting to know him, it doesn't matter how much Bible you know. Like, it really doesn't if you're not living it out. And that's sadly what the background I came from is having fear of going to hell. Wasn't a relationship with Jesus.
Interesting.
It was horrible, and I never want to go back. It was terrible. But
when did that fear break?
I really
Or when did you start sensing his presence in a way that he was not just a you need to do for God. He was a loving, intimate God that wants to be intimately known and wants for you to come close and know you. So
I think I really had my faith tested when Kellen was in the NICU, and I really saw like things happen in there. So
okay, so it wasn't before that.
It really wasn't before that because, like, so I was living, of course, for Chelsey. I got pregnant at 19, halfway through my senior year in high school. So it wasn't really, like, I had God in the back of my mind, but I wasn't, like, living for him, if that makes sense. So I wasn't really, like I was caring just enough, but not enough to be like, okay, I'm following you, Lord.
I mean, that's everybody and their mother, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then again, like I said, I'd never had that, like, really taut relationship between me and God, and that I don't have to be terrified of the big man in the sky. Like, I can literally come to be, yo, I messed up,
Yeah.
Lord, I need you to help me.
Yeah.
I wasn't really taught that. Not that my parents didn't have a big impact on it. They really told us about like a relationship with Jesus, but it really didn't like click. And then like the church I went to,
there has to be like a revelation.
Yeah, and the church I went to, I don't think it really like taught more about that. I remember just hearing about hell a lot, and I was like, I don't like what this is like, making me scared.
That's real, but you shouldn't fear someone to follow anybody.
Exactly.
Fear to follow is not really the best way to start a loving relationship with anybody.
No, it's not about avoiding hell, and that like clicked after maturing a lot, and really everything happened after the kids. So got pregnant at 19, had them months after I graduated. Sadly, I had a lot of issues, so I wasn't really able to finish my high school in school. I had to do a lot of it at home. So like, I remember my senior project I had to literally do in front of my guidance counselor in my home at my dining table because I wasn't able to go to school because of how severe my body was at the time being pregnant with them. Like my body was completely rejecting my pregnancy. No one could tell me anything. I went to a lot of doctors and specialists, and they just didn't have a legit answer. They were just like, we don't know what's going on. Your body's like pretty much rejecting this pregnancy. So
did you walk in a lot of fear while pregnant?
No, I don't think I did. I think most of it was just like honestly trying to get through the day. Like I was so stressed and so dazed of like constantly getting nauseous, constantly TMI, throwing up like literally 24/7. So when they say, "Oh, I had morning sickness," I was like, mine was all day to the point where like I was.
And through the whole pregnancy?
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much the whole pregnancy. I think I was on like the strongest like nausea medication they could give, and it still wasn't working. Still wasn't working. So
I had it. That's why I know.
It was terrible.
It was horrible.
It was terrible, and that was the main reason I couldn't go to school.
Die.
Yeah. When you start like throwing up some black stuff, you're like, what is happening right now?
Like, this isn't good. this isn't good. I'm out.
I don't think this is normal.
I don't know if I can see. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. The delivery.
It was terrible. There has been multiple times my mom had to drive me to the ER. Jardo had to drive me to the ER because it was just.
So that's called something because there's morning sickness and then there is like a syndrome. There's like a thing. It's called something where it is just overtakes the pregnancy. But I forgot what that name is. But you may have had that. But ignorance is bliss.
Probably at this point, even if I knew what it was, it didn't help.
You're like, which is why we don't have another one.
Yeah. Either way. So on top of that, we also had issues with Kellen. So at 25 weeks pregnant, I found out that
Kellen's your son.
Yeah, Kellen's my son.
That we're talking about today,
and the one that went through a lot of crazy things, and he has a twin brother, Zane. At 25 weeks pregnant, Kellen, I found out that
you were 19, got pregnant. You found out you had twins now. Which this is crazy.
I'm a twin, so
okay, that's crazy.
I know. It is crazy because my entire life I was told twins don't have twins, like my entire life. And then I talked to the doctor who I saw for the first time for my ultrasound and whatnot, and she's like, you are a twin, so you have that gene. So like
I thought it skipped a what happened to that?
That's why I said
just a myth.
It's just a myth because I'm a twin and I have twins. So
so were you freaking out more, or are you more elated that you were 2 for 1 kind of thing?
I really didn't mind it. I kind of always wanted to have twins, and I really wanted to have like a boy-girl twin. Jordan wanted 2 girls, so that didn't happen. But I didn't really mind. Yeah, Jordan wanted 2 girls.
I could see that.
He yeah, maybe one day, but either way,
so at 25 weeks, you felt something was wrong. No.
I think so something happened about like a week or so before my next doctor's appointment that I found out that Kellen's amniotic sac broke. I remember like laying in bed having to pee a lot, and I was like, what is happening? This must just be like when they're like, oh, when you're pregnant, you have to pee so much. But come to find out, it was when Kellen's amniotic sac broke at 25 weeks, and which is insane because it's not supposed to. From my understanding, that liquid is what helps their lungs to grow, which is like why he had so many issues with his lungs when he was born. So when they found that out, they rushed me to the ER, and they were like, you are going to be monitored until you give birth. So at 25 weeks, you go to 40 weeks?
Yeah.
That was going to be a long time.
Wow.
So I ended up getting rushed to the ER across the lake, and I went to Osher Baptist because they wanted to make sure that they had a specific heart specialist, because another issue we found out when I was pregnant, they thought that Kellen might have had like some type of heart thing, that he may have needed open heart surgery when he was born, which thank God that did not happen, because
Oh my.
that would have been even more. But so ended up going to the hospital. I was there in like this room just waiting for them to come. I had them at 29 weeks. 29 weeks, they came via emergency C-section. I remember
Wow.
that day I literally called Gerardo, because we had so many like little scares that we thought they were going to come before them. I remember calling Gerardo. I was like, yeah, they're coming. And he was like, okay. He was over here at Subaru of Covington and driving his sweet little time, driving across the lake. Oh, here we go. It's another like close call. Yeah, he comes in the room, he holds Chick-fil-A in his hand, and he was like, oh snap, this is actually happening. So I was like, yeah, we're about to, have the
Wow.
kids today, like right now. And that was overwhelming, because I've never had any like broken bones, any like crazy dental surgery or anything. So that was like my very first
surgery.
surgery. So I remember being anxious about that. Like that was very scary.
I can see why.
Oh man, I was just terrified of like, I think terrified of
Anesthesia.
the needle.
Yeah.
I've always heard about the needle going into your back. That terrified
the
me.
epidural, yeah.
Which was insane. I remember holding on to the nurse, and then the person behind me giving me that. I was like shaking so much.
Yeah, trauma.
It was terrible. So we ended up having them at 29 weeks. Callan was like 2 pounds a couple ounces, and it was 3 pounds a couple ounces, which is insane how small they were.
True, yeah.
I didn't get to see them until the next day, because I had just gotten major surgery, so they wanted me to rest. Jardo and all of my friends and family got to see them and sent me photos up in my little room, and it was bittersweet, I guess. I was happy that they were here, but not in this way.
So they were compromised coming out. Would you say, what was their, like, what were doctors saying about them? Like, they're healthy, they're great, we just have to keep them in a, specific thing because they're so small? Or was there like, this is like...
Yeah, so I think the main thing was that Kellen's amniotic sac broke, and they were really worried about that. And he ended up having all these things hooked up to him when he was born.
Right.
Like, he had a lot of things. He didn't have a trachea yet, which I'll get into that. But when he was born, he had, like, a bunch of, like, just things everywhere. Like, he was hooked up to a lot, because he was the smallest one. He was the one that everyone was worried about.
Right.
Because of his amniotic sac breaking, which, again, to my understanding, was the liquid that is
what caused...
Is what, at the last, like, couple of weeks, what helps their lungs to grow. So he ended up...
Okay, so the loss of it...
Yeah, and he didn't have that. So a loss of that on top of being 3 months preemie. So odds were not in his favor.
Dude.
He
Sorry, y'all watching. He's in the studio today, so I'm like, dude. What a fighter. You're my hero.
Yeah, he's gone through a lot, but he ended up, I think they said that he had underdeveloped lungs when he was born, so he had a bunch of things hooked up to him, and so did Zane because of him being preemie. But that's when it's all started, the fight of, okay, we have to get them to where they need to be, because they're just not like healthy enough. They're not strong enough. They need to really grow a lot more, because they're not supposed to be here. They technically needed 3 more months.
Did you fear that they would die? Or that realization never...
I don't think that realization ever really hit me. And it's funny because, like, on my podcast, I was talking to my friend about our testimony. Through that and through, like, the Kellen's NICU stay, I really wasn't that freaked out, which is pretty insane to say, because of, like...
So there was, like, probably a supernatural peace from God?
There was literally a supernatural...
Or steadiness.
Peace of God that I didn't even know at the time.
Yeah. I think people need to hear that. Like, there is a peace of God that surpasses understanding. And the Bible talks about that there's a peace of God that surpasses. Again, why would it say it surpasses understanding if we couldn't have peace when all hell is breaking loose?
Yeah.
But we actually can, because that would freak me out. Like if I was, twins, and probably your youth helped a little bit. You 19-year-olds
kind of like, what is happening?
It was like, I don't know, like cool. But there is a peace that God gives in certain situations that is interesting. Like even with Phoenix, when I was going to the hospital, there was just like this something came over me where I got under control, and it was like I was steadied, and there was an anchor that was lowered down to the ground, and I was just as a rock, and nobody could tell me, no test result, no, the blueness and the purpleness of his skin when I first saw him, nothing could tell me that he was not going to be okay.
Wow.
And again, I didn't overthink it as well. I didn't even know what happened to him at first. It was just more of a knowing that just kind of settled me, and you may have just had that. So you didn't go back into that fear.
So yeah, there was definitely a peace of God that I didn't even really understand, which is the peace of God that surpasses all understanding over me during the entire time that Ken was in the NICU. I think being young and not really fully understanding everything really helped.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really hard to not give into like what you're looking at when you're really seeing your son like fighting for his life. So after they were born, I want to say about 2-ish months, Zane was able to come home. And actually before that, about 1 month in, he ended up having to get surgery in his arm. And I always forget about this because I'm like, yeah, Kellen went through all these things, but Zane went through some stuff too.
Right.
Because he was preemie. He still was supposed to be in my stomach 3 more months.
Right.
But about 1 month after they were here, he ended up having a severe staph infection in his shoulder.
No, and staph is
Dude,
bad.
it was insane because like it blows my mind at how much they had gotten it in the NICU because I'm a germ freak.
I mean,
my mom.
First of all, surviving staph as an adult is hard.
Yeah.
We have known people who have passed away from those complications. So how is a preemie, like really, with a little teeny body and not fully formed,
right?
That
I asked myself the same question.
Survive staph.
They literally had it multiple times.
I mean, these are miracles, right? Like, you're telling me miracles upon miracles already.
Yeah, they had it multiple times. I remember every single time, like, it happened, we would come in, there would be a bunch of stuff on the door that we had to put on because we had to be extra careful. But I'm like, dude, where's this coming from? Because I'm a germ freak. Like, I got Germ-X on me all the time. And my mom is even worse than I am. I remember every time we would go see them, she'd be disinfecting my phone, disinfecting the table and all these things because my mom's just like that. And it wasn't that many people who went to go see them. We were monitored with who went to go see them because of that reason as well. So yeah, they had it multiple times, but Zane ended up having to get that surgery about, I'm gonna say he was about 1 month old. And they went in, got all the staph in his shoulder, and he thankfully had no issues with that surgery. And then after another month, which would be 2 months, he finally was able to come home, which was awesome. But sadly, Kellen was still trying to fight to breathe. He had those underdeveloped lungs. I don't remember when they categorized him as failure to thrive, but I remember that was another big thing. He would be up and down a lot. Like one day he'd be doing amazing, next day he'd be doing terrible, and then they would be like, "Oh, we need to push this medication. We need to push this steroid and all these things." So one of the big thing was pushing steroids because apparently it helped develop his lungs.
Right.
Which the amount of steroids he had in that hospital, I just pray against it because it's insane. He was so small.
I think that people don't understand that. Like the medical community is doing all that they know how to do, that they've been trained to do, to help this. But it's like we know that all that stuff is risky as well. Like everything has a risk, and I know that it's like but. I mean, it was like life or death. Like you either, you got to try stuff. I know. And I think this is one of the things that people don't talk about enough is just the stress of having to let go of what they're doing to your baby or your child that you're like, what is that going to do long term?
Trust
and
me.
what is that going to, like, is that going to have an opposite effect? Like, I remember thinking, okay, the tube went down my son's throat, but now there was something on the tube that gave him a MRSA or an infection that now he's fighting for his life. So I was constantly getting mad at the medical community as well as praising them, and I'm sure them listening can understand that's just what parents go through. It's not throwing anybody under the bus. It just is what it is. I was constantly just in this wrestle with what was being done to my son, knowing that what else can I do? And I had to let it go to the Lord. That's when I finally was like, I don't know if this is going to work or kill him. I don't know if it's saving his life or ending it.
I know. That was a big thing for us because I come from a background where my mom used to be a fitness and nutritionist, so I had a very organic background.
Oh, boy. So for you, extra.
I was very, very, like, I hate to say anal, but anal with like what he got. And the doctors weren't expecting me being this young to be like questioning them too. So I was like, this is not normal. This is not normal. When I get sick at home, my mom was like, here's this alternative thing.
Yeah, like I barely gave my son aspirin, like for a headache. I'm like, just drink more water, So, and then it's like I was always organic until he was like 14 years old and started to fight me back. And then it was just like hot dogs from there. But it was like, so I was the same. So they were freaking me out. Yeah. I'm like, look how many pressors. You're going to do what? Yeah. And then it was just like, that infection didn't come from anything that he went through. That infection came from what we had to do. And I'm like, wait, what? So I was in this. And then as a mom, the whole thing is in your how God made you is to protect your children. And I wanted to protect them not only from the death of what happened to him, but what they were doing to him. Because you told me that the tube going down saved his life, but you also just told me in the same breath that he's fighting for his life because an infection came from it. It is a very, I think that's why I wanted to have you on. Being in the hospital is very interesting for a parent. Yeah. Fighting because, and I've talked to parents who have had kids going through cancer treatments. I can't imagine that. I know. Because that's what I felt with the tube going down. It was like the very thing to save your life could be the very thing to take it. Right. That is a mind messer-upper.
I know.
And for a mom, I felt constantly guilty that I was putting him in harm's way, even though they were doing whatever they needed to do to save his life. Right. And then I never knew, and then I didn't know enough to like grapple with it so much. And as a mom, even the guilt, but also I have to that's when for me, I had to, because the whole time was me contending, you will live, Phoenix. Right. Oh, he will live. And then palatal care came. No, he will live, so get out of my face. I was a little mean about it. Only because I was fighting. I was in fight mode. Don't touch mama when she's in fight mode. Right. And I'm sure the medical community sees all that, but it was also a moment where, and tell me if you experienced this, and I know you're going even more into, like, because it's kind of triggering me, to be honest with you. But I'm in it with you, just so you know. That's why I'm bringing this up, because it's healthy for me, too. Yeah. Is that was the moment I've been contending. But then when they told me what was to save his life is causing an infection that he is now, like, could take it, it was like, the rage I felt like that I was so mad at myself. I was mad at them. But that's when I had to go, God, I have to now surrender him.
You have to trust and pray that, like, Lord, there is no other option right now. I don't know what to do. I don't have control. I do not know what to do. I'm trusting that he's going to be able to take this, and there's going to be no issues. Yes. That was us in the hospital. There were so many times that they had to give him steroids, and I read about all this stuff. I'm like, oh my word. Like, I know. What's going to happen down the line? Because he had so much at the time, because that was the thing to help his lungs grow. And I think at that point, I just was like, okay, whatever it takes to get him to where he needs to be, and I'm just gonna keep on praying and trusting God that
he will withstand whatever.
He's gonna have no side effects. And you know what's funny? My the NICU with Kellen really brought me back to Jesus. Brought me back to like understanding.
That's what I was going to. My next question.
Yeah, understanding who he is and how like he really is the God of miracles. Because, like I said before,
you could feel him in it with you.
It shook me to get back to. I had to say where I was because, again, I had the fear of going to hell, but shook me to get back to, like, seeking him and trying to understand him in the right way.
Right way, yeah.
In the right way. And then on top of that, Gerardo...
Not just avoiding punishment, yeah.
Yeah, on top of that, Gerardo grew up Catholic, and he was, like, in El Salvador was more of, like, a different type of Catholic on top of...
Gerardo, I love you, but Salvador is a different type of Catholic.
It was a different type of Catholic.
That's another episode,
for sure.
Y'all. That's another episode.
And they didn't go, they only went on like the typical like holiday stuff. So he didn't have like such a strong like faith background. And then, so during all that, he's seeing me praying, getting back to my roots, my mom, my grandmother, who like, my grandmother prays for every single person she meets. And I mean that, like she'll meet someone in the grocery store.
Okay, that's why you're saved, girlfriend.
I'm telling you.
And that's why they were saved out of the womb.
My grandmother
Don't mess with a praying grandmother.
My grandmother,
that's where all the
family.
miracles are happening because of them.
Yeah, my grandmother is someone I look up to a lot because she's been through a lot, and till this day she'll still like give you the shirt off her back no matter like what you're going through. She wants to truly help people, and she was praying hard for them and my mom and my aunts and my family and whatnot. But it really shook my faith to bring me back to the Lord. I like to say that it was God saying, "Hey, Chelsey, do you remember me? Yeah, right. You need to come back."
And, because you need me. Because you need me right now.
Yeah.
And you're gonna, there's things coming up. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to know
You're
me.
going to have to trust me. You're going to have to trust me.
Yes.
And then, of course, like I said, Gerardo seeing all this happen, he's like, he didn't really understand it, and on top of that, he was kind of just
he's a dude. On top of that, he's a dude.
Yeah, he was a guy, and they kind of not like don't
My
worry.
husband was a little out to lunch in the beginning, but you know they come around. They come around.
He was just holding my hand pretty much during the whole thing, and kind of just was just
there. That support system, yeah.
Which I think is what I needed, because I did have a lot of people praying. So I guess to go into like what happened in the NICU, Kellen fighting for his life, doing well one day, doing terrible the next day. I want to say the very first phone call, we had 2 phone calls. One of the first one was, hey, we think it's Kellen's last days. You need to come and like, you know, figure this out. So, because we were over here in Mandeville. He was in Osher Baptist of New Orleans. So we needed to rush over there to figure out what to do. They were telling us all this information. I'm kind of just like numb, trying to understand everything that they're telling me. And
are they saying that he's not?
We can either A, have nature take its course.
Wow.
Or B, continue to do the steroids and everything we're doing. So we chose.
So in their eyes, he wasn't progressing enough. And it was like, what's the most compassionate thing to do?
Right.
Because that's what we were told.
Yeah, that's what they said. They're like, what do you think this quality of life is?
Yeah,
what
the
do you
quality
think?
of life issue, yeah.
And I was like, I want to do anything and everything I can for my child. So let's choose B, continue to do literally what needs to be done. So we chose the continuing the steroids and all the treatments he was on. But that same day, Jordan and I decided to do a fast, which he was like, what the heck is that? And I had to explain to him. We ended up doing a full, like, 24-hour, like, no food fast. I think we may have had, like, 1 smoothie in that 24 hours. And it's funny because I can't remember if it was, like, hours after that 24-hour fast happened or days, but he ended up getting better out of nowhere. And they were
fast,
doing,
you know.
I know.
I'm just saying.
I know.
Some things only can be healed, through prayer and fasting.
Some things can only be healed when you stop giving into your flesh and you start denying it.
Just start really opening yourself up to the Lord.
Literally be like, okay, Lord, I'm gonna literally just feast on you because I'm not doing it myself.
There's nothing else that I got.
And that was I think one of the first times I was like, oh, what is happening? And really shook Gerard to be like, okay, something doesn't make any sense. He was the kind of guy at the time who was like, oh, it's all science. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And after that happened, it was, he did well for a little while, still kind of tiptoeing of like not doing great, doing great, not doing great.
So there was a touch and go period. When did he start coming out?
So after,
or did it get worse before it got better?
After that, I don't really remember how this came up, but they were like, okay, we can give you, they called us again saying it was Kellen's last days again. We need to come make a decision.
So they called more than once for you to come and make a decision to take him off everything.
Yeah.
And let him go.
So this was the...
Or to keep fighting.
Yeah.
I think that's important for the audience, the listeners to realize that this wasn't just one phone call that freaked everybody out and we got past it.
Right.
It was multiple calls.
It was 2. Thank God it was only 2. But the second one was like full on, like we had a meeting with every single person that was on his team and the doctors and
it was like
my family.
It was like everybody was like, we need to decide.
We need to
now.
figure out because it's like do you either A, continue to do this and like see nothing or him get worse, or B, there was this option where they said we can do a trachea tube and a ventilator, which I don't understand why that wasn't a thing before that. I don't know why they didn't ask that, but either way.
He was too young. I don't know.
It may have been they were just waiting for him to get stronger.
Risk, yeah.
So that got presented, and I don't really remember how we decided to make the decision, but we made a decision because we just whatever
like,
it
what
takes.
Else? Yeah, what
like
else?
What
Are
else?
we
Like we've been doing the same thing for months. We really needed him to
I have to trust God in this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was scary. We ended up choosing that decision for him to get a trachea tube, and being on a trachea tube and a ventilator required him to also be on a feeding tube because if he eats by mouth, he can like throw up and then it going into his lungs. You don't want that to happen. So he ended up getting the trachea tube, to hook up to the ventilator to help him breathe because his lungs were
a lot of things at once.
It was a lot of things at once.
For somebody who's, just ate celery for the first 19 years of her life.
It was tough. And like I said, it was really just like, I was in the mode of like, whatever it takes, because I'm tired of seeing my child suffer.
You have to let go and do new things.
Exactly. Yeah. So after he was on that, he actually did pretty well. I think one of the most scary and like crazy things that happened was when he got out of that surgery, they said that he was in a medical coma, so we couldn't touch him, couldn't really do anything with him, so he had to just lay there. Because I think they didn't want him to like grab at these things, these new things, which was like a big adjustment for everyone. But that was just weird, like being able to see my child, but I can't touch him after this major surgery. I couldn't really do anything.
His life.
That and
see, medical community, we're not just all like ganging up on you. Like some things that you do are great.
Not against it, but
we're joking. It's they know it's messy for parents.
It's hard making those decisions.
Plus, we're going through some trauma, and
I was young. We're just like, what is happening most of the time? Like, I thank God that I didn't really understand the severity of things at the time. Because looking back now, I'm like, what?
Now,
what did I do?
Did you pray? Like, were you like at this point pressing into the Lord, like in prayer, and worship, having like, what are you saying in His Word? Like during this time, did it like were you leaning in those ways, or was it just more of you just trusting Him more in general? But were you leaning into Him in those ways? Like, did any of that help?
I think it was a little bit of both because I wasn't fully like how I am now, like full on like prayer warrior, but like I was not praying, but I also wasn't like going as deep as I probably should have. But I definitely was trusting God because
you're also exhausted,
Yeah.
I don't think people understand that God carries us. That's the whole thing, is like when we think that we have to keep contending, sometimes that gets in the flesh a little bit. Sometimes it's like, okay, am I now doing this in the grace of God, or am I now like fighting like in futility because I'm trying to do it in my own efforts and thinking I'm earning now the healing. I slipped into that. So the Lord's like, you now have faith in your faith, which is not me.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. dude. And that was because I was like, why isn't the rest of it happening, Lord? And this, that, and the other. And I mean, even though he just saved my son's life, or, isn't that humans? We're back to complaining what we don't have. And so I got into that, and it was like, because you are now fighting in your flesh. When the fight that started out in my grace, supernaturally, you're now trying to pick up the fight in your own flesh. And now you actually are having faith in your faith to earn the rest of it. And that you're not just trusting in me. So that was a big one. So I was wondering how you were being exhausted, and it sounded to me like he carried you.
Yeah, I really like. It was all God. That's all I gotta say, because
because you were like, I don't know.
I was young and just like
I'm exhausted. I'm taking care of one kid at home, and and then. I know that you brought him home at one point, and so it's still traumatizing me because Gerardo told me about this story. And it's like, I think about it all the time. I don't know. Thanks, Gerardo. It's like the fear of God in me. But I was like, about the trick. Like, people don't talk about, like, when you leave the hospital with very, very sick children that are still not out of the woods, and you and it's like, and I understand the hospitals have to release you at some point. There's people that have to come in that are life or death, but they're releasing you with kids that are now on oxygen tubes and G tubes and ventilators that now parents are supposed to just, after a few times of doing it, should know how to take care of, or now rehab an anoxic brain injured teen or a newborn with all these still in life and death limbo, really. And you're just like feel tossed out, if we're honest. And again, I always want to preface this, like, we're not dogging the medical community. You have to do what you got to do. Right. It's just how we deal with it on our end. And we're just kind of like let out there, feeling like we get home and we don't know what we're doing with tubes. And I mean, just for me with Phoenix's tube, there's been times where it's gushed out because I didn't properly clamp it or something. Yeah, like something I thought it was in, it wasn't in. It's gushed out everywhere. I'm trying to get to some place, and I've got formula all over me. It's like I'm back in newborn stage where they newborn has a bad accident on the mom, a diarrhea accident or a vomit accident, and so it's like we're back to that. Or now, I didn't have the the tube in the throat situation. Thank the Lord. He wasn't on that. He just came with a G tube. Yeah. But talk to me about how you felt leaving the hospital with having to take care of medically fragile children, that you had to learn to use all the gadgets. And then I do want you to talk about what Gerardo told me about was it the trach?
Probably the trach. The very first time we brought him home, he had an issue.
We have to talk about that because I'm not even traumatized. So talking about that with you will just help me.
So, and after he got the trachea tube and all the other stuff that came with it,
did you feel dumped out? First of all,
it was definitely.
Or are you just like, yes, I'm out of here and I'm.
No, well, he was still there for a couple more months. Kellen's full time that he was in the NICU was about 9 months in the NICU, from being born to going home. In that time after he got the trachea tube, it was me, my mom, and Gerardo having to learn. I think they required 3 people to know.
Oh, really? That's good. That's good.
Which really helped.
Yeah, because that didn't happen with us.
Yeah, and then again, I was young, so I think that's another reason why they wanted that. So it was me, my mom, and Gerardo. We all had to learn everything: how to clean it, how to take the trachea out, put it in, which was. That is the most terrifying thing having to do, is watch you pull something out your son's
throat.
Pull something out their throat. Them coughing because you're taking away their breathing. About this.
There needs to be a support system. Just the trauma of having to take a trick out of your child's throat.
Oh man,
what if you don't do it right? What if you can't get it back in? Yeah. What if you didn't clean it?
There has been times.
What if you cleaned it but something got on it from the? I mean, it's all that.
Yeah.
All that.
Oh yeah. It was terrifying. That was the most terrifying thing having to do.
Terrifying.
It was sitting there watching him lay there, pull this thing out of his throat,
I have it in my it's a visual for me. I'm just freaking out.
It was hard. It was hard. But I'm very thankful that I have my mom and Gerardo who also learned it, because if I had messed up or whatever, they were there to help me. And thankfully that was the only thing we had to change. Everything else was like you had to clean.
Yeah.
That was it was insane. But so after we learned for a couple of months and they saw that we were able to take care of him, he came home about 9 months from being in the NICU, and he came home with the trachea tube, the ventilator, the G tube, oxygen, a pulse ox.
Wow.
And probably some other things I'm not remembering, but he had a lot of medical stuff that he came home with.
How was it acclimating to that at home?
It was a little bit of an adjustment because of how much he had, and I think one of the main things was like just like the oxygen and all those tanks everywhere, and
everything.
like having I think he came home with like the thing that connects to his ventilator to clean the air to go in, and that thing was loud and obnoxious, but it cleaned the air to go give him air, if that makes sense. And another adjustment was Zane seeing Kellen for the first time, and Kellen seeing Zane for the very first time.
That's true.
Because even then, like when they were in the NICU together, they were in separate beds.
Right.
Like
so
they weren't
didn't
together.
know each other, yeah.
They didn't know each other. So I have a video
Being
of them
twins.
like looking like, who are you? Like almost 1 year old, because they're like what 9 months old now. Like who are you? Like I kind of remember you, but kind of don't. So that was an adjustment trying to take care of two, and then one of them being a medically needy kid, and a lot of the attention was towards Callum because of all this stuff.
Yeah,
So
I can see how that has been an issue.
It was an issue. Trying not to neglect Zane, but also being like, this kid is requiring a lot more of my attention.
It just is. That's what we had to go through with our daughter.
Yeah.
As well.
And thankfully he was so young, so he wasn't comprehending that. So he was so young, he didn't understand. But yeah, that was an adjustment. The very first time we brought him home was at night. Kellen's so in between his trachea tube is this tube that connects to the ventilator. In the middle, which I think they should make a different way to do this. In the middle, there's a catch can thing that catches all the excess water, because you can't just be breathing like dry air into your lungs.
Ridiculous.
You have to let that out, some of the water out at times. In the middle of the night, it's the very first day bringing him home, you're already kind of exhausted.
Oh my God, first day.
The first night. I can't remember if it was me or him. I think it was me. I accidentally lifted it up a little too far, and the liquid went into his lungs.
Okay, see, that freaks me. It gives me chills.
It like seeing him purple. I was like freaking
he got
out.
purple.
He got purple at one point. Thankfully,
first night
bringing him home,
and you fought this long.
Yeah,
and it's 9 months.
Yeah.
You kept this kid alive.
Yep.
And now he's purple on your watch. See, that's what I'm like. That kind of stuff will just without
Dude, I freaked out. Not gonna lie, I freaked out. I was like, why, Lord? Like, why? Like, why?
All this just to die in my house.
Thankfully, the ambulance and everyone came very fast, and he recovered quickly. Thank God. I don't think too much went in, but it definitely was enough for him to be like choking. Kind of like almost drowned my child, but that's okay. Anyways,
drowned my kid. I'm glad we can laugh about it, but you have to understand. Like people listening are like, why are they laughing at something? You got to understand. I tell this to people all the time who's never gone through these things. Mm-hmm. If you don't laugh, right? These are painful memories.
Yeah,
these are traumatic memories. I tell people all the time. We laughed by his bedside in the hospital. And we were like looking at each other, is this okay that we're laughing? And I honestly feel the Lord gives us a sense of humor in darkness. And also to be able to heal from it. Mm-hmm. And nurses came up to me all the time because I was like kind of cracking jokes, and my husband was cracking jokes. That's actually how Phoenix woke up. And it's through a joke. And which is interesting, but humor has been our superpower for all of our lives of how we got through everything. And the nurses go, you don't have to explain it to us. We see so much tragedy and darkness. Humor is like saves us.
Wow.
And so. That's what I have to explain to people who are like, why are you laughing at something like this? I'm like, you would too. If you went through it. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, and if you've gone through it and you don't, I understand too. But for people like us, apparently, there's just people that need to laugh about really horrible situations.
Yeah, I don't know if I was laughing necessarily. I know that.
Not in the moment.
I was not. Now I'm like, oh gosh, why did I do that? But again, I was so young. And I thank God that I was so young because it really just like made me oblivious to a lot of things, like how severe it was. Thinking about it now, I'm like, what? Like, why? Like, Chelsey, why were you not freaking out? Why were you not like freaking out that your son is like dying in the hospital and they're literally sitting there telling you, hey, you need to either choose A, let nature take its course and unplug him from everything, or B, choose to do everything that we've been doing for months now.
Right.
But he recovered after that situation.
And y'all got into a groove.
He got into a groove. He had a lot of like in-home therapies to teach him how to do like just like the normal things. Like how do you play with toys? How do you walk? How do you talk? And that was like years of a lot of therapies. And I thank God for everyone was a part of that team to help him, because it's so weird seeing like your child not walk. And he's over a year, 2, 3 years old. I can't remember when he started walking. I want to say it was around 3.5-ish, give or take. A lot of delays. A lot of delays, a lot of speech. And I still, again, never heard my child talk because he had the trachea tube. He can't talk because it's blocking his vocal cords and whatnot. Never heard him talk. He made little noises here and there, but never heard him talk.
Can he not talk now because of the trach?
Or is it just developmental? It's just, I think now it's just
because his vocal cords are still intact, right?
Yeah, he doesn't have an issue speaking. Okay. I think it's just a lot of delay. It's delay. It's a lot of delay. Like, he's still trying to eat, and he's 8 years old.
He's 8 years old, so that's what I wanted to get to the listeners, that he's 8 years old. He made it. We're all good. We're all alive.
Yeah.
There's been, that's the part that gets hard for folks for our kids who have beaten death, is that these kids are fighters, man.
Oh,
and God did mighty miracles, but it gets hard for a parent when you've seen so many miracles, but the delays, the setbacks over the years.
I know.
God, will you continue to do? Will you continue to do miracles? Will they continue to beat the odds? Will they continue to thrive? Will they get married? If we're honest, will they have children? Will they have purpose? Will they be able to go to school or have education? Like, these are things that people of faith that have seen God do a miracle in saving a life, but having to have that enduring faith. Will he keep moving them forward?
Right. And we're believing that. We're still believing that. Kellen has beat so many odds.
I can see it.
He's not supposed to be here technically. He's not supposed to be breathing on his own technically. He's not supposed to be walking. And
he looks
potentially
amazing.
Not supposed to be eating. And he's going to very, very soon.
Both of them look amazing.
Yeah, they're
in the studio, guys. I'm telling you. If you're not on YouTube looking at it, it's just they're amazing.
Yeah, Callan has overcome so much, thank the Lord. And the last thing that we're pretty much working on right now is just getting him to eat by mouth. And again, it has a lot to do with just time and development. Like,
has your faith ever been shaken through this process, or been in unbelief that God will do more with him?
I think there's been times where I'm like, Lord, I want to, like, literally just talking to him, Lord, I want to believe you can do it, because he's gone through so much worse that he's overcome. This simple thing of eating by mouth, like, what, God?
It's
like,
nothing.
But then again, I remind myself, like, Lord, it's in your timing. I don't know why he took 9 months in the NICU.
Right.
And now I get to say my son was in the NICU for 9 months and he beat the odds.
He did,
He fought through a lot for a long time, and now he's here.
But it took 9 months, I
don't know why he's not eating yet. And it's very hard.
And we know God can do it like this. We know he can do suddenlies, because he did some suddenlies.
I tell him all the time.
Mine was a suddenly. Yours took 9 months. It's all like,
I know. I tell him all the time, like, Lord, you literally brought dead bones back to life.
Literally.
You healed the blind, the sick in an instant. Like, you healed someone just because they believed from far away. What else do I have to say or do, Lord? Like, I believe you can. I tell him all the time, like, Lord, I believe not only are you going to heal Kellen from not eating, but I believe you're going to dissolve the G tube. Like, you're just going to make it go away.
Yes.
I have that faith to say, I know you can do it. Like,
Yes.
why? You're still the same God of the Old Testament, the New Testament, who did
Yes.
all these crazy, amazing things.
Yes.
You can do this.
Yes.
I know you can.
Yes.
It's about believing He can
Yes.
and knowing He can.
Knowing He can. So that's what we were talking about before we even started recording was being moms who have seen miracles and our child, beat death.
Yeah.
Just because I believe God willed it so. And so I just feel like, and it's like, okay, Lord, why is this taking so long? Because Phoenix is still on a G-tube too. And I'm like, why? Dissolve that thing. Like,
Right.
can't you just open his mouth? Chomp, chomp, chomp.
Just give him this strong desire to start doing it, Lord, please.
Like even though my son can eat, it just takes him forever to
Yeah.
eat. And so we have to have that for a calorie count. But, his voice, like opening, like that's all Phoenix wants to do is speak. And it's only because his velum not closing where he can't. And so I said, so the Lord always reminds me what he actually reminded the Israelites when he saved them from slavery. Did I not open the Red Sea so you could go through it? And he had to remind these folks over and over. And then generation has had passed. So these stories are passed on. Well, look what God did to save us from Egypt, from the slavery. And he also said, remember the Red Sea. Remember when I gave you water from a rock. Remember when I gave you manna from heaven when there was no food around.
Right.
Like, remember these things that I have done for you. Can I not still do them now?
Right.
And I'm constantly remembered. Remember, Kim, not only the Red Sea in the Bible, but what I did for you in the hospital, what I did for him, Phoenix, in the alley. When there was no people to come save him, some lady out of nowhere from a hotel decided to go that way out of nowhere. Or the doctor that decided one more time. And that's when he came after being blue for 50 minutes already. So look what I've already done. And that should give you the faith that nothing is off the table. Nothing is off the table. And so I say that to you and with you today. And to whoever is listening, I really do feel it in my spirit.
Yeah.
Somebody's listening right now and needs to hear that. Just remember what he has done before. Remember anything you didn't know have a way out, or you didn't know what, you could continue. Whatever it is, just remember what he has done, and he is able and willing. I think that's the thing. Will you?
Yes.
I know you're able.
Yes.
Are you willing?
Right.
And that's like this whole other wrestle that us as believers, and that's what's called the good fight. That is the good fight of faith.
Yep.
That's why I called the podcast The Good Fight, is that it wasn't just the good fight of faith that I had to agree with God what he was doing in Phoenix, but it's a good fight of faith, and frankly, it's harder. The enduring faith needed to believe that he will do more.
Yeah.
Even when you see setbacks, even when you see delays, even when the devil lies to you, even when you're so exhausted with that dang G-tube, you want to pull it out yourself and just plug it up with your finger. I mean, I've kind of gotten a little rowdy with that, every now and then, to be honest with you. So that is the good fight, is to remember what God has done. And also, I feel to say this to somebody listening too, and I say this in every podcast because it has to be said, is that our job is to contend. Our job is never to not believe. We are to believe because it says, that with God all things are possible. Now, it didn't say guarantees, but they're possible. So we are to have faith, but his job is the result.
Yep.
He does have ultimate authority of whether he gives and takes away. That is the Lord's prerogative. And so I always say, yes, I have 110% belief that he can and he will, but I also have 110% surrender.
Wow.
To not my will, but thy will be done. And people go, how can you have both at the same? You can. Yeah. In the Lord, you can.
Yeah.
You can have absolute surrender of the outcome and absolute trust that he will. That's crazy. I'm now preaching to myself. I needed this morning. But that's what I hear from you, is that 9 months fighting for his life, that turnaround of life came in 9 months, not for my son in 50 minutes. It came for your son in 9 months. So also to those listening, don't compare your stories to us. Our stories are just here to say, keep going.
Right.
Our stories are not to be compared. Like, I can't compare my story or yours, although we can feel the same things as far as G-tubes and situations. But his healing happened in 9 months. And even a little bit after that, and Phoenix got that life in 50 minutes. So it's not about comparing the situation.
Right.
It's about all identifying with the God of the situation. That's who we have faith in.
Yeah.
Not faith in our stories, not faith in what happened, but faith in the God that you and I had to stand on, that you and I had to trust when they were getting punctured and steroids and tubes that became MRSA and all these things. I had to let go, but that was the faith, God, you will get them through, but also the letting go of surrender that you're ultimately, you're on the throne. And whether you give and whether you take away, it is for your glory somehow. And that these stories are just puzzle pieces in the bigger piece set of what he's doing with his son on here on earth. And somehow we give him glory in these stories that we have. Now, I always like to talk about how what we have gone through has produced some kind of calling, some kind of ministry out of it. You have a podcast. Tell people about that so they know where they can continue to follow you and your story and your kids' stories. Tell me a little about how that came about and also what's going on with that and where they can tune in.
Yeah, so long story short, I ended up meeting this girl through our church that we started going to, this newer church, and come to find out she had a baby that she was taking care of that had a G-tube. I had never met someone who had a baby with a G-tube, so we connected through that, got really close, and then a year before I met her, the whole idea of a podcast came to my mind. I really wanted to do it. I was really like trying to be like, okay, Lord, people need to hear about this that Kelly went through. Like, people need to hear it. I feel like I need to share this story. Got everything to do this podcast, but like it didn't feel right. I didn't want to just sit in my closet like I was with my microphone speaking the whole time. So I just kind of let that go and literally surrendered that to God, even though I had a name and all this equipment ready to just do this, but I just felt like it wasn't the right time. Year-ish passes, I meet this girl who has a baby with the G-tube, and we connect, and come to find out she had got prophesied over that she was going to start a podcast years before I even met her. And God gave her the same name as I had already picked out.
Wow.
The exact same name.
Talk about confirmation.
When I tell you, I was like, because like I didn't feel comfortable just sitting there by myself talking to a microphone about what Kelly went through. I need like the commentary and like someone commenting and saying all these things to like really get the story out there. And God just brought us together, and we started this podcast called Breaking Bread Podcast.
I love it.
And we just, if you go and look at our videos, I think we have 6 of them right now. The first couple of them is me talking about Kelly and all we went through, talking about Gerarda's background, and then her background of what she's been through with that, her issues and whatnot. And it's a lot of good information and stories on
and
on
I
those.
do want to say this because I'm not the best interviewer or plugger in the world, just because this is still new to me. I want to plug the Reminding and say thank you for supporting Chelsey and I and our stories, because really we wouldn't be here and this wouldn't be possible without the Reminding Coffee and Creative House in Covington. Please come get coffee.
Good.
Oh my gosh.
Good. It's
so like.
The food is so good.
So good.
I spend way too much money here.
I spend way too much money. And they have the best little gift shop ever. And you can pick up amazing gifts if you just need a little something to pick up real quick and bring to somebody. Some really classic, one-of-a-kind pieces.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to give them a shout out. And Studio 7, where her husband is kind of the king over, is he's the producer and director of our shows. But there's a recording studio actually within the Reminding Coffee Shop. So come and check us out. And I just think it's amazing that, okay, I may be throwing you under the bus, but I'm just going to say this. This is what I'm this is what I'm feeling. How old are you now?
28.
Okay, she's still like a baby. 28 years old, and I'm like an old fart. But let me just say this. God will have folks go through. He will allow things. Now, death and destruction is never from the Lord. That is just brought in through a broken world, through sin and Satan. I mean, you got to understand, because there's God, there is a dark thing out there that wants to kill, steal, and destroy. But Jesus came to bring life and life abundantly. And that spiritual war is always happening. But God allows some things to happen so we can overcome whatever that is. Everyone is different and chosen for different things. But he used that story of overcoming to help somebody else.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm saying. But I do know there is a lot of young mothers, teens, who have medically fragile children that nobody helps.
Wow.
They're either from the foster care system and they don't know how to clean the G-tube. They don't know even what dosage of Tylenol to give a child. Why I know this is because I used to serve them in a nonprofit, and we had teen mothers that had medically fragile kids. So I'm just saying that maybe you and this other your co-anchor, who also has a feeding tube. My prayer is that the Lord will find you young, scared mothers that their fathers aren't around. They were like, peace out, because they were young, 19, 20, maybe 15, and they're at home, and maybe they live with their mom or a grandmother or a caregiver, but some of them are just alone.
Yeah.
And I just pray that however that happens, I don't know how to, but that you connect and have a ministry to young mothers who need not only the practical help, maybe you can help them through the practical help of a medically fragile child, but also to be that support system that you had going through this, because not everybody has that. So I'm throwing it out there. I feel a little Holy Spirit
Hey, Lord,
on my body.
whatever. I said whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I don't care. Use me.
If there's a nonprofit you can, however it happens, I just pray that the Lord will direct you. Maybe it's just one girl that you meet, just like this other girl.
Right.
That you start meeting these women and these young women who have medically fragile children that don't know what to do practically, as you had to come to learn the hard way on some things, or they just need that support system and prayer because they're alone.
Yeah.
And no one's stuck around. So I'm going to pray that the Lord hooked that up for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I do believe that our certain unique circumstances that God walks us through, there's other unique circumstances that are kind of similar to ours that we need, only we can speak into.
Right.
And so I'm going to pray that you find where that bridge is, or even that, Lord, bring her a young mother just in her daily life that has this story that needs someone like her, that carries you, Lord, and that needs to be shared with another young woman. And again, I know how it feels to really need someone to help me, tell me what to do with the tube. Like if I didn't have my husband, I just was squeamish about stuff. And it gave me anxiety. I almost had panic attacks over changing it, because I was like, what if I do it wrong? What if this? I was not like that nurse mom growing up, okay? I was really like, oh, if someone was, if Phoenix was bleeding, I'm like, go to your dad. I don't do any of that. Like,
I cannot touch
emergency stuff. Like, you handle that. So I know a lot of young moms that need you and need this other lady and need your podcast to listen to, especially being a young mom. Well, is there anything else we didn't cover that you feel on your heart to share as we close?
No, I agree with everything you said. And I've said this till like this day, that I honestly believe I went through a lot of that for God's glory, because now I get to say my son went through all of these crazy things and beat the odds, and he should not be here today. Like, he should not be here right now. And he has overcome the odds of like not walking, the odds of not talking, the odds of not breathing on his own, and a bunch of other things. And all he's got is the G2 left. And Lord, if that's what's the only thing he's going to have for the rest of his life, then so be it. But I'm believing otherwise. But he has overcome so much that it's all because of God. And I know that someone needs to hear it. I know that like when I was in the NICU with my son needing to hear all that, I didn't hear that, like similar stories to mine. And if this can help someone who's in that similar situation as I was in, I pray that this is like a little bit of light shining through and saying like, look, my son went through this for 9 months. I was fighting a lot in the NICU with him. And I, again, don't know why he went through that for so long, but he made it. Like, it took a long time, but he made it. So,
and you didn't even lose faith. You gained faith. And you gained a closer,
it brought me close to God.
A closer relationship with Jesus.
He brought me closer and brought my husband to, like, realize who God is and be like, okay, what is happening? And like
outside of that El Salvador faith.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you would have talked to Jarda back in the day in the NICU, he'd be like, it's all science. Now he's like, no, it was all God.
Yeah.
Which is a blessing in itself there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think just all glory to God and thank you, Lord, that he's overcome all those odds that were against him.
And if anyone also is listening, and maybe this is not your experience, but you know a young lady this is their experience. Maybe you work in a hospital. Maybe you work in a family center. Maybe you work in foster care. Maybe, I don't know who you are, but if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what? I know a young lady that needs Chelsey's, to minister to her or to know Chelsey. Reach out to me on Facebook. Like, it's under Kim Winston Bigler on Facebook. Message me, whatever. And is there somewhere you can be contacted?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Chelsey Passon, and also our podcast, Breaking Bread podcast. I'm in control of all of it. So wherever you want to reach out, definitely reach out
to her, to me, whoever, and we'll get them connected. Would you mind praying us out and praying for those young ladies that maybe need that touch right now, or for anybody listening that needs hope in the Lord?
Yeah. Father God, I want to just start by saying thank you for this time to being able to sit with Miss Kim and talk about the crazy stuff we went through, Lord, and thank you for blessing this time. And Lord, if there's anyone watching this podcast, I pray that you put it on their heart to reach out to me that really just needs someone to talk to. I feel like there may be someone who just needs someone who's like me, young, and just needs someone to talk to about the similar issues and situations we have went through and are currently going through with our sons, and that you give them the strength and the ability to reach out to me and ask for help in any way, shape, or form, Lord. And I ask that you bless this podcast, let it reach every person that needs to be reached through this, and let your light shine, Jesus, through all this craziness that we're going through, that everyone gives you glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and fight the good fight.